Hey, everybody, welcome to the Green Cover Podcast, where we have really interesting conversations with some of the top producers and experts within the regenerative ag movement. Join us as we learn together how we can steward, regenerate, and share God's creation for future generations. You know, most for most producers, for most farmers, most ranchers, you're either a really good producer or you're a really good marketer, and it's really difficult to do both. But my guests today, my friends Blake and Stephanie Alexandre from California, Northern California, they're doing a great job with both. And so I'm very excited about this conversation that we can have to talk not only about how do you produce things in a regenerative way, but how do you do a really good job of marketing those things in a regenerative way as well? So, Blake, Stephanie, welcome to the Green Cover Podcast.
Thank you, Keith. It's wonderful to be here. It's a privilege and an honor. And so thank you for having us.
Yeah, well, I've gotten to know you over the last couple of years. We've been to a couple of events together. You guys have, supplied some of the dairy products for some of our events, and we've had rave reviews on that. But other people listening may not know you yet. So why don't you go ahead and start out by just kind of introducing yourselves to folks, who you are both personally, but also what the Alexandre Family Farms, what that looks like in the context of what you're growing and marketing right now.
Yeah. So primarily we're really simply just dairy farmers out here in extreme northern California, right on the coast. We're within a mile of the ocean, and our ranch is 3 miles from Oregon. So literally the upper corner of California. This is where we're in our house right now, where we raised our 5 children on the farm. And years ago, we kind of set the priority to try to differentiate our farm and make it a viable option for our kids as they grew up and met their spouse and made a career decision. And so we've been chasing organic and now regenerative and A2 milk and these specialty reasons for our existence, really. And so we literally live in a really cool climate where it's very conducive to 100% grass-fed type production.
And I think it's good to know a little bit of our history too. Blake grew up on a dairy farm in Northern California where it's all grass based. I grew up on a dairy farm in Southern California, more confinement, but my mother was chairman of the California Milk Advisory Board through my high school and college years. And as a child, I prayed I'd marry a dairy farmer. So, but my mother being involved in that kind of what happens to milk after it leaves the farm gate was really pivotal for me, and always being aware of dairy and just understanding how important dairy was in the diet. And then we meet at college. I was ag business, he was dairy science, and he was an outstanding cowman, won World Dairy Expo outstanding judge, first place. So Blake really knew cows. And when we became organic and learning to do no harm to the soil early on when we bought our ranch 33 years ago. And it's like, how do you become organic? What do you do? And someone told us about Acres USA. The keynote speaker was a doctor teaching people to go to the farm instead of the pharmacy. And at the same time, Blake is listening to Gary Zimmer, the biological farmer, and he's understanding soil better and learning about grasses and pasture.
Because this would
And
have been how many years ago? What time frame is this all this happening?
25 plus.
yeah,
Yeah.
2003 is when
Okay.
we went to USA. We were organic, started the organic process in 99.
Okay.
And that was pivotal. It really gave purpose to both of us and really guided our passion. I mean, passionate as a dairy farmer, passionate as a mother, but God just embraced it. It was really purposeful. And we started also just becoming deeper in our faith, in our walk. We both always have been blessed to know the Lord. So that's been wonderful. But to understand his purpose for our life was really as farmers and making a difference in the food system. And that was kind of the beginning of it. And we just followed our passions equally. He on the soil and grasses, and myself on the nutrition.
Yeah, that's a great story. What a great way to start out. Now, Blake, you don't. How often do you remind Stephanie that you're actually an answer to prayer for her? You know,
Yeah, I
being
know. Isn't that wonderful? Be careful what you pray for, huh?
yeah,
Um,
works
Yeah.
both ways.
Yeah.
Oh,
It,
that's too good.
yeah,
So
it touches my heart every time she says that. That's cool.
no, that is great. So tell people a little bit more. Uh, you mentioned that you're doing A2 milk,
Yeah.
and again, I think I mostly understand what that means. But go ahead and
Okay.
explain why A2 is important, why you chose to go that route, and how that makes a difference for your customers. I've actually got a story that I want to share about it
Yeah.
too when you're done
Okay.
with that.
And so let me just pick up on Stephanie praying that she meet and marry a dairy farmer. And when she met me, I was from a farm that was, 150, 250 cows, up to 300 occasionally. And it was on our leased and rented facility in the little town of Ferndale, where I come from. And so she often then accuses me of kind of getting too big and too much. And so I want to put a little context to who we are. We literally milk. We've got more than 5,000 mature cows milking on 5 locations now, over about 100-mile span. We still have what was my great grandfather's farm in Ferndale, where our oldest son and his wife are. And anyhow, so we have been, on a journey to kind of just do the best that we can with what God brings our way. And in '07, he brought us this A2 milk concept. And we really learned a lot about that. And so, Stephanie, why don't you kind of go with that?
Yeah, A2 is the digestible protein in dairy. We like to say A2, so people learn to understand it's a DNA. You get one from the dam and one from the sire. And so, in learning this, The Devil's in the Milk from Dr. Keith Woodford, his book, we started searching for those genetics, and we were already paying attention to things in New Zealand because we're grass based here on the coast. And we found that that's where they had the genetics to purchase A2 semen. And so we did that and started breeding all of our cows that direction. So fast forward into 2015, 16, we're talking to our dairy buyers saying this A2's for real. We're reading the science. It needs to go this direction. We needed to launch a brand in our region and wanted them to do it. And when they weren't interested and wanted to poo-poo us, we decided to launch our own brand.
Yeah, so it's not that we really had a desire to own a milk company, if you will, or a brand. That was not in the cards at all. We really wanted to do it under someone else's label, but it wasn't happening. And 21 years ago, we had taken our kids to the East Coast and kind of learned about this chicken operation where pastured chickens and laying eggs or hens on grazing situation. And so our kids started a little label of eggs called Alexandre Kids, and for us it was like no employees, just our kids, kind of sink or swim. And so that business has been going, and it gave us enough confidence in the retail world. While the kids were in college, we were about 5,000 birds, and when they came out of college, um, we wrote a plan to go to 30,000 birds, and then we kind of doubled up from there once. And so we run about 40 or 50,000 hens on grass, and sell a lot of eggs, and it's been a really wonderful experience. And so we had this little bit of retail knowledge, just enough to jump into the dairy side when we finally exhausted all of our options. And it was pretty clear that Organic Valley or Horizon weren't going to come out with an A2 version of milk. So
And Keith, if you can imagine, we're parents with children that are all born in the 90s at this point, so they're all
Mhm.
pretty young. And we are learning about nutrition together and feeding our kids and as well as our cows. And we know that milk from grass-fed cows is so good for us. So then, well, yeah, eggs from chickens on grass must be great too. And so the family we visited in Pennsylvania is the family that has been visiting us this week. So it's just a
I
small how God put it all
yeah,
back together.
love
And
how
so
it comes full circle. Yeah.
yes, that was some of the motivation, was not only raising kids, but also our community, our state region needs eggs like this. But for us, it was just selling them on the farm in a local farmer's market. But it was also bringing nutrient dense foods that are better for people to the market.
Yeah. So I love that journey. I love how the progression, has gone from, starting small, scaling up. I mean, milking 5,000 cows across 5 locations. This is no small operation. And we'll dive into a little bit of, the intricacies on the marketing side as well, because that's no small feat, the processing and the marketing. But yeah, I love how the kids got involved, and the eggs came up, and it gave you that little taste or flavor of what the retail side may look like. Because we do a lot of retail sales as well, and it's hard.
Yeah.
It's very rewarding, but it's very hard.
Yeah.
Manage inventory and employees and all
Yeah.
these things.
Yeah, being a farmer doesn't necessarily train you for retail world. However, being a farmer trains you for problem solving, and so we can navigate through it.
And it's really
Yeah.
good for your prayer life, right?
Yes.
And to your credit, I'm looking at your magazines or your sales. There's a bunch of
The
beautiful
annual catalogs in the background.
catalogs. I'm so glad we've gotten extras when we've seen you, because we
Yeah.
end up giving them away. So
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
that we have very many more, because we get
Yeah.
visitors sometimes to the farm and we talk soils and grasses.
We can definitely send you more. So yeah, that's great. That's what they're there for. So I wanted to just share a little story. At our Regenerative Nexus summits that that we do every year, and we'll be doing again in January. This past one in Scottsdale, we had the kefir. And I think we had milk, chocolate milk and white milk, the Alexandre Family Farms, and I remember overhearing one of the other people that were there, and one of my employees, one of the other sales team members, in fact, it might have been my wife who was there, was saying, "Well, you should try this. This is, the best kefir. It's the best yogurt." And they're like, "Well, no, I'm lactose intolerant. I just haven't been able to do that." And she worked on them and worked on them and worked on, 'em, finally got them to try it, and they just fell in love with it because they were able to consume that dairy without having all of those issues, that they were so used to having, and had basically just given up on dairy, was living a dairy free life. And I think they're probably pretty loyal customers to your brand now, and partially because of the brand, but mostly because it is that A2 that they're able to tolerate. And like Stephanie, you said, it's the digestible part, and they were able to consume that with no issues. And so, thank you for doing that. Thank you for bringing this brand to the market, because there are, that's not an isolated example, and I'm sure you hear this all the time
Yeah.
from your customers.
Yeah, we do, and I was sitting next to somebody at a wedding on Saturday night who had been introduced to our milk about a week before, and he was just so excited that he'd been drinking it all week without issues, and it was first time he's doing milk in years, decades, and so we hear this story literally all the time, and that's exactly why we do what we do. The world, or particularly here in the United States, did not have an A2 option in the organic world. And so that was important to us to keep it organic and bring that to the marketplace. And let me just explain real quick. So 2/3 of the world's population believes that they're lactose intolerant. And these are the folks that we now know, a lot of people in our communities that, just don't do dairy, and they believe they're lactose intolerant, but it's kind of self-diagnosed. Lactose is the sugar in milk, and so what we've come to know is that it's 95% of the time it's not the lactose that's the problem, it's the protein. And so when we talk about A2, we're talking about the digestible protein that God put in mammals, all mammals, including people, that is intended for our diets. And what happens somewhere along the line, maybe 1,000 years ago, there's a gene mutation on this amino acid chain between numbers 66 and 67. There's a histidine where there's supposed to be a proline. And so that creates this little 7-chain amino acid called beta casein morphine that doesn't digest and doesn't break down in our stomach. Some of us have no issues with it, but some are more and more people are having issues with it. And it's very, very similar to gluten intolerance in wheat, right? When we were kids 50 years ago, nobody knew about these things. And nobody cared either. And now it's just rising up. It's on everybody's radar. And so our bodies, because of the heavy loads of everything that Bobby Kennedy says is real, and it's causing issues in the American diet that we all need to wake up to.
Yeah, and if people are introduced to digestible dairy through our dairy, then hopefully there's a internal message and a prayer from us that that's a gateway to better food system that they're discovering.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And we talk about regenerative ag as a systems approach, and you have to look at the whole system. It's the same way with our body, and when we
Yeah.
abuse and we run down our body with all this other stuff, whether it be poor diet, lack of exercise, all these different things, I would guess that it makes us less tolerant to everything else, and so it's just kind of been this downward spiral where if you were healthier or had better diet or all these other things, you may not be as sensitive to some of these. But regardless, we're glad that for the A2, actually, my niece and her husband, who live right next door to us, they have a little Jersey A2 cow as well. So, so we have A2 milk here on the farm, um,
Yeah.
milking one, not 5,000.
Good
Uh,
start.
yeah, it all starts with one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I'm not sure they're looking to expand, but we're thankful for it. So you're doing this grass fed. So you're feeding no grain, everything is organic. Talk to us a little bit about the way that you're growing your grass, some of the regenerative practices that you're doing to not only improve the nutritional quality of the grass, which we know will improve the nutritional quality of the milk. But so talk about those practices, and then also talk about how you've seen your soils change since you started doing that.
Sure. So out of our 5 dairies, 2 of them are 100% grass fed, meaning zero grain.
Okay.
And 3 of them currently have grain. We're working on transitioning one more the other way. And to where we'll have 3 no grain dairies. And that's hard to milk cows with no grain. It's really difficult as a dairyman when you pull the grain away. We did it 13, 14 years ago when Organic Valley first started their 100% grass-fed program. We were the first dairy, and it was 2 of our neighbors and us. And it was a bit of a disaster in a sense because none of us knew anything, and our cattle genetics weren't quite right. So we do use Fleck V genetics out of Germany, and we love those cattle. They're a dual purpose breed, kind of a Simmental based breed, that's bred for meat and milk at the same time. We've been using those genetics for a little over 11 years. And so pretty much all of our females, I'd say 90%, have Fleck V blood in them, and we're going to keep leaning into that. And that's the perfect cow for the no grain diet. And they milk well, and it's not a big sacrifice production wise. What was the rest of that question?
Well, we'll talk about our climate here. We can grow green grass all year round. We can hear the ocean from our bedroom window. So we're right in the coast, on the coast, and our average daily temperature differs 11 degrees from winter to summer. So it's always cool. It's
Yeah.
never too cold and it's never too hot. It's beautiful. It's perfect for grazing cows. We do get a lot of rain in the winter, so we have freestall barns and the appropriate housing for our cattle in the wintertime that also protects the grasses and the pastures. And so because of that, and Blake mentioned the 100% grass fed on 2 of our dairies, and the other 3 we do feed grain. But we lean on grass, I think, like no one else does in
Yeah.
the world. And
Yeah.
as far as dairy and the way we can graze grass and get that growth and keep it green all year round, it's just amazing that
Yeah. So
our cows do so well on
300
grass.
days a year on grass is pretty quite common for us. I was just talking to somebody here an hour ago. They're just a couple hours away in Central Oregon, and it's 95 degrees, and I'm like, wow, it's 53 or 4 here, and I can only see a quarter of a mile down the road. It's so foggy, and this is whatever it is, September 2nd. It's like this is our normal summer weather.
So the beauty of our grass and the flavors still come through in our milk that we call our red label, that where those cows get a little bit of grain. It's not a lot of grain, but it definitely helps with what we need them to be grain for.
Yeah. And
And
so
that,
what have you seen change, in the soils,
yeah,
since you've been doing more, I assume, rotational grazing and regenerative type mindset applied to the grazing as well? Because there's good ways to graze grass, and there's, kind of
yeah,
not good ways.
right.
Mhm.
And so I like our farms in Ferndale, my hometown. Um, we grazed, well, literally, we've been grazing there for 5 generations. Even as conventional farmers, we were heavy in the grazing because it's just a beautiful little environment, similar to, say, New Zealand or Ireland or something, is what it feels and looks like. And we, when I was a kid, 63 this year, but so 50 years ago plus, um, the gates were all open on the farm. In the morning, the cows went out and they walked through the 7 big fields of 40, 20, 30, 40 acres each. And then in the afternoon, we brought them in and they milked. And there was like no concept of rotational grazing of any kind, or management grazing, or, I don't really care about the acronyms, but the concept of, using polywire, electric fencing, and really managing the rest period on pastures. That all started for me back in probably the extremely early 80s, as I was getting into college. And Alan Savory and his partner back then, Stan Parsons, had done some educational stuff out our way here in California, and so started thinking and looking at it very differently. And so we've now been whatever intensely grazing, I guess that's 45 years ago already. And so we keep getting better and better and better at it. We still have a lot to learn, but we're getting better at it. So when we bought the ranch here that we're on 33 years ago, the soil organic matters were about 2 to 3%. And in 2018, when our daughter got out of college, she's the one that manages our cows and our farm, the cow side of our dairy. And so we taught her, John Schneider and I went out and taught her how to pull soil samples, and she pulled a whole bunch of soil samples for like a month. And it was just shocking. We thought that she had made some mistakes, because we were seeing organic matter in the 12, 13, 15 range. And so we waited a year, because we only pull them in October. And we redid it again before we told anybody. And really all we did was then, double check her technique. And we're pulling soil samples in the top 6 to 8 inches. We're not looking to go 30 inches like some folks are. And so again, we verified that those were real numbers. And so the reason for that is because 31 years ago, when I met John Schneider for the first time, he has since passed away, but he became a good friend who lived about 2 hours north of us. And we just really focused on intensely grazing and resting fields. And we focused on our organic program, because in the late 90s, when we went organic, and your commercial fertilizers go away, and your toolbox kind of empties, because you don't know what to put in it as a new organic farmer. And so we just started focusing, like after Gary Zimmer came out here in probably, 03 or 4. He just says, well, spread that compost out. You over applied magnesium. He said it a lot faster and a much higher tone than I do, but it was pretty exciting. And so we then just started, okay, we're going to make as much compost as we can, and we're going to spread it as thin as we can over our land. And we're always going to focus on the worst 20, 30, 40% of our land. Last year, we spread over 2,000 loads of compost, which they're big loads. We're talking like 20 yards per load or something. And so we get a lot of free shavings in, wood chips, our solids manure from our freestall barns or the
Fish
milk
waste.
barn, and then we get fish waste, and we compost our dead cattle into it and our dead chickens, and so anything that we could possibly get that's free, we put in there. Shrimp shell, crab shell, and we've always got a massive abundance of compost happening, and we keep spreading it as thin as we can. So that's part of growing organic matter. I understand some regenerative specialist, legalistic folks would say, well, that's outside inputs. And I'm like, yeah, it is. And so I'm cool with that. It gets us over the hump. We picked up 1,500 acres across the river 4 years, almost 5 years ago. The land that had absolutely been abused with lily bulb production, so flower production, lots of chemicals, lots of spraying all winter long. And that ground is just a mess. We had the Advancing Eco Agriculture folks out, John Kemp and David Miller, and it was really wonderful to see it through their eyes here about 3 months ago and understand that, wow, John says, you've got 3 feet of topsoil here, but the top foot is a mess. It's just this solid hard pan that's dead, and I clearly knew that. We've been trying to do what we can with very little budget, and so we're now kind of incrementally trying to pick that ground up and lift it. We're only kind of doing it in thirds because we don't have enough resources to do it all at once, but yeah, kind of reclaiming land, fixing the abused soil where the previous owners weren't farming in harmony with nature. They weren't focusing on God's plan for how soil works, and that this whole regenerative movement is just a way to explain what the first farmers did, Adam and Eve in the garden. And I think of that all the time. Is that this is just us getting our arrogant heads out of our arrogant rear ends, and realizing the system that God gave us, and quit pounding our chest saying we can feed the world here in the U.S., which was true, but we did it at an extreme cost, and there's no way we were going to do it forever.
Yeah, and the other thing that we can add to this is that we have nutrient ponds for our manure water, and we have aerators on them, and we have our irrigation system set up to where we can get our nutrients out to the fields as part of the irrigation system, or just to dewater sometimes and pay attention to which fields need them. And we see that green grass get darker green, and know that those nutrients were needed there. It's really exciting
Yeah.
to see that.
So
And then
let me just explain that more clear
Sure.
for the listener. So we have a solids separator at all 5 farms. The solids pile becomes the base of our composting program, and then we add in all this other stuff. And then the liquid, which is still carrying the majority of the nutrients, is the pond water that Stephanie's talking about. And what we learned at an early stage was, let's keep it aerobic, not letting it get anaerobic. And so we agitate and stir it, and it just kind of subtly. It's not a big aeration project. It's just circulation, and it keeps it healthy. And so when we do pump it out to the fields, either directly or injecting it into an irrigation system, it's more of an earthy, pleasant odor, and it's not nasty. It's not anaerobic. And so at the same time, the biology that's living in the field says thank you, as opposed to, oh crap, what is that stuff?
I also wanted to add, when Blake was talking about Alan Savory. So when we were in college together, we started dating. I'm a sophomore, he's a senior. He graduated, went home, and was really paying attention to the pastures and helping his father on the dairy. And so it was time to do my senior project, and he encouraged me to do it on rotational grazing and raising replacement heifers in Humboldt County, where he's from. And so we both dug into Alan Savory's work, and Stan Parsons, and working with the local ag extension agent to find out weather patterns and all this stuff that really I saw Blake get into. And we had all the DVDs for Alan Savory back then in the 90s. And so his passion for that soil and the grasses was really real. It was fun to see him
Yeah, that
do
was
that.
way before organics as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And I'm glad you mentioned John Schneider too. And we've had this conversation before because, John was instrumental in helping us get started as well because, when we first got started, we didn't know where to get stuff. And, we came across John at a show somewhere and he just, he's been, yeah, he was out to our place, multiple times and just his willingness to share information, to share his knowledge.
Right.
Um, it's just a great example of how all of us should be and being willing to give back. And so, yeah, he was a big part of Green Cover getting started as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, he literally just became a good friend, and we could, kind of talk shop together, and we
Yeah.
saw the world very similar.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe one more thing before I kind of want to dive into the marketing side of things here, but I know that in listening to some of your talks and seeing pictures and just knowing your operation, you've seen a huge shift in the wildlife populations on your ranches as well because of how you're grazing, because of how you're overall farming. Just talk a little bit about what that looks like and why that's important.
Sure. Yeah, it's absolutely build it and they will come attitude, right? We were outside with this family this morning, and the birds were just overwhelmingly noisy, right? We it just and they're just songbirds and blackbirds and whatever they are. I'm not a birder. I don't watch, but we do have 240 or 60 species on our ranch because we are a birding destination. But in before we bought the ranch, I was in a California leadership program, agriculture leadership program, and we had a chance to go to Washington D.C., sit down with the Secretary of Interior and a whole bunch of undersecretaries, three undersecretaries, and the question was, "What's going on out there? What's happening?" And we were just buying this ranch, and this ranch came with an endangered species called the Aleutian Canada goose, and it's a small goose that flies from the Aleutian Islands over to the continental U.S. and basically lands on our ranch. We are as west as you can get in the continental U.S. Generally, right here in this region, and so we're a big part of the Pacific Flyway. Birds that are flying the coast always hit our land, right? Because we stick out into the ocean. And anyhow, so that population of those birds was about 5,000 at the time when we bought the ranch in 92. And we just took it on as a special mission. Like, what can we do? Because I'm now educated and somewhat enlightened that, what can we do to help? And so we had a different attitude from the normal farmer attitude, like, get the heck off my land. And so we embrace these birds, and today there's 250,000 of those birds. They've been delisted a good 15 years ago or better, and so it's one of the single success stories of an endangered species getting delisted to threatened and then completely delisted, and now they're a hunted species. And we have gotten a lot of credit for that comeback,
Great.
and it's really cool. We've got four of those birds that were shot out of the sky at one point 15 years ago that are living in our yard today.
Yeah, that's great. And it's not just the waterfowl, but you've got elk
Yeah,
and everything
Yeah.
else kind of roaming around there too, right?
Yes,
yeah,
and early on, we started fencing riparian zones. None of the riparian zones were fenced. Cows would just walk through the little creeks and stuff, and it was just normal. And so we started learning about it. And at first, we didn't want to get involved in NRCS projects or take government money, but then it's easy to want to do it eventually. But fencing off the riparian zones and planting trees, and then we made a commitment that we're always going to plant 75 trees every year. And so we keep that commitment and sometimes many more. And so, as Blake said, build it and they will come. And the creeks just started looking beautiful. Blake's worked with U.S. Fish and Game to learn to teach them how we flash graze inside the creeks after the duck habitat is all done, and as far as they're hatching their eggs and everything's dried up a little bit more, we put in the cows, a big group of cows into that riparian zone. They graze it off. That way you're not getting that shredded wheat die off grass. That's desertification. We're still getting the regenerative practices right there at the creek bed, and then the cows are out again. And it's just beautiful in those beds every year. We've been doing that. And then the U.S. Fish and Game was doing salmon monitoring because we have the coho salmon right in our river that we surround. And they were doing the baby salmon or salmonids and measuring, and they were doing them in all the creeks along the coast. And they came back, and the 2 creeks we own had the biggest growth in the salmon.
Yeah,
And
the little fingerling fish or whatever were 30 and 40% larger than their siblings, where they were all hatched in one creek upriver, come down the river, and find these little tributaries to live for their very first winter. That's the uniqueness of a coho salmon. They stay in fresh water for an extra season. And yeah, and so it was like incredible proof that what we're doing is working and contributing, to something that we don't even see. These fish, we hardly ever see them. And yeah, it's just a wonderful example. We have a tremendous amount of frogs.
I was just going to tell the frog story.
Just
So
crazy.
when the kids were little, we go to town in our suburban with 5 kids, and it's dark, it's night, and the frogs would jump in front of our headlights on a rainy night. And the kids would say, "Oh, kamikaze frogs," they're jumping in front of you as you're driving, and there would be a bunch. And then one time I realized after we left our farm, there were no more frogs in the rain.
On
And
a 10-mile drive to town.
yeah, and I realized that it was just only around our ranch. And then that Sunday, once I had that epiphany, that Sunday at church, it was Psalms 23, where he causes, or that talks about the green grass and peaceful
Life flourishes.
pasture. And then I went down to the bottom of my Bible in the concordance part, and it said green grass where life flourishes. And it was just like I wrote that in my Bible, the frogs, that they are living where life flourishes. And so, yes, then the elk come and the bald eagle nest and everything, and the coho salmon story. And so it's really sweet to be a part of that and live where life flourishes.
Yeah, so eventually, I think what we're simply saying is wildlife also choose regenerative organic farming. That it's that
Yes.
simple. The elk can jump fences and go wherever they want, but 300 of them decide to live here.
Well,
And
and it is,
25 years ago, there were 0, right?
that's a testimony to the resilience. And I love that phrase, where life flourishes. Certainly is happening there. So I want to kind of steer things back over to the marketing side of things, because it's great to be able to produce this A2 healthy milk, and it's great to have all the wildlife, and those are all great benefits. But unless you can make the system profitable, as you and any other producer knows, it can't be sustainable. Sustainability only comes when you are also profitable. And one of the ways that you folks are making it work is you created your own brand, out of necessity, as you mentioned, and we can go into a little bit more detail there. But you've also started doing your own processing and labeling and marketing and all of that. So dive into that part of your journey maybe a little bit more. Talk to us about the challenges that came from that, because production has its own set of challenges, but marketing, uh, I don't know that they're harder or easier, but they're certainly different. And so just talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. When we started the milk brand, we had a couple of guys that had gotten together with Stephanie at a food show, and they both worked for Whole Foods, and encouraged us to go off and start a dairy brand, A2, but also they kind of like dare to be different. They said, that there's been no innovation in the dairy case in 40 years, is what they told us. In other words, do something unique and different. And so we at that point made the decision not to do 100% grass fed, because we didn't have the right cattle yet. So we did the grain fed version, which we refer to as our red label, and we put 6% butter fat, because as you manage cows on grass, the nutritional goodness is all coming from the grass, and it's in the fat. And it's present in the fat. And so the concept of low fat or non-fat grass-fed dairy is it's beyond silly. It's actually stupid. And so it's not a way to feed anybody. And I just, you're now are isolating and you're having sugar water that came from a cow and you're feeling good about it because you think it's natural. Well, it's not. So anyhow, so we did high fat yogurts and whatnot. And
This
then
is 6% butterfat. What what would a typical herd be?
yeah, normal milk across the United States is 3.25. In California, the minimum standard is 3.5% butterfat. So we're kind of almost double what is normal. And then we also did a slow cooking or processing of the milk, in that we vat pasteurize over a 30-40 minute period. Gives it a little cooked flavor and smell, which in the industry at college I was taught that's a bad thing, and I think it's wonderful. It makes our product unique and special, and so what we were trying to do is give the consumer a reason to pay more to get more. And so then we are now the highest priced milk on the shelf, or the highest priced egg, for instance. And that means that when the young mother walks in and wants to feed her family organic, and she's going to buy her first purchase, it just might be milk and eggs. And the price on the shelf is really our advertisement that says, here's the best. Now she takes it home and has to convince her husband it was a wise move. So it better taste well. It better taste the part, right? And then the story on the website better be real, right? We can't be false and fake. And so those three pieces, I think, are the secret sauce. And it's no secret, it's just common sense to the success of our brand, being different.
It is. And education was big for us. We had a lot to tell people about the A2 because not many people had known about it or heard about it. And a lot of people don't like dairy or don't drink it. And so if they don't like it, it's because they were drinking the wrong dairy their whole life when animal agriculture started getting demonized. Now we have it's okay to drink whole milk. In fact, it's so much better for you. And launching with the 6% was just a key that we are going to be different and we're going to be better. In fact, our milk's going to taste the best. And I love it when you give a sample of our milk to somebody from a foreign country and they just get so excited that this tastes like the milk they grew up on. And that's real milk, that's real dairy, and that's real nutrition. And so if we can get those in the mouths of all kids and back to drinking milk, then we're accomplishing our goals of bringing dairy back. And when we launched it and trying to get space, it was almost like we're the alternative to alternative dairy. We're the real dairy, but come back to us because so many people left real dairy. And we did a lot of in-store demos when we launched and getting people to try it. And just that one-on-one at stores, our daughter-in-laws, actually both our daughters, we were all doing demos across the West Coast where we launched. And so Blake said it that we are real. We are real dairy, and what we put on our social media is real in our marketing. We want to tell the story. We want to tell what happens on the farm. We want to educate people, educate them about regenerative practices, educate them why our food, why our dairy and eggs taste so good. And we know it's the gut of the plant, which is the soil, and that's where it all begins. And start educating people about that process, and maybe they'll start a garden also, and maybe they'll look for other regenerative farmers, because if a farmer is concentrating on that soil and what grasses he's planting or what crops he's planting in a regenerative way, that is making a difference on the nutrition. And that's more to be told in the future for ourselves and other regenerative farmers, that it's tied to nutrition, how healthy that soil is, and more we're giving back to that soil that grows that is tied to the taste of those products. And I know from the vegetables we buy from a local farmer that does regenerative practices and how he nourishes his soil, how great his fresh vegetables taste. But I also know through our milk.
I Keith, the question also kind of stimulated some thoughts in my head, I think that your listeners would appreciate. When we started our brand, it's kind of a scary thing, and we had some cash accumulated, and we just told ourselves we're going to do everything right, whatever right is. A couple of farmers don't really know what right is when you're jumping into the markets and processing and distribution and all this stuff that is foreign to us. And so we spent money at every turn to try to get our logo correct. We spent extra money to get the right people to do it. And anyhow, so 3 years in, we're doing great. We're having success. It's our red label only. And then we realized that consumers really want this 100% grass fed. We were selling it to another outfit as yogurt for Trader Joe's. And we decided, okay, we'll lean into the grass fed with our own label. And then, eventually that just took off, and our green label now outsells our red label, because that's the nutrition that people really, really want. And so now that we've got the Fleck V cattle that have matured and make that an efficient option for us, we're pretty excited about that. I think the other key to our success, the fear of failing, motivated us in the beginning. And then I think we simply got too stubborn to fail about 4 or 5 years ago, when we should have shut it all down. And the banks were just really, really tightening up on us. And, we just barely made it through all this. It's the last 2 years have certainly turned around, last year particularly. And we're on our way to refinancing that looks like, we can finally say, okay, we made it. But it's been a long, difficult road.
We yeah, Blake's right. That it's been hard, it's been long. Um, we knew that if we stopped at that point, we would have lost it all. And so we just had to keep going. We had tremendous support when in 2009 and 10, Humboldt Creamery start over. In 2009 and 10, Humboldt Creamery, where we sold all our milk, went bankrupt, and we were just in a pickle. And so we were really blessed that New Island Capital supported us and bought some land, and then we leased it back. And so that really saved us. And then they held on while we launched our brand and made sure we paid our banks first all the time. So we've had some great support along the way, but it was scary, and it still can be. But we're really excited about what the future holds, and consumers' response to better food and the food system. Dairy sales in general, whole milk is up. Plant-based sales last year was down a lot. So people are paying attention where real food comes from. We're just excited we're part of that great food movement.
We're actually at a point here in a couple of months. We're going to host a little regenerative conference here on our farm, primarily for other dairy farmers to get them qualified to the principles primarily of regenerative ag. They're already organic and they're already A2. And so we want them really to qualify so that we have more of a milk supply into the future, because our brand keeps growing.
It does.
So basically you're developing additional producers to come through your brand, but they need to do it the right way.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Partner farms.
Yeah, when we launched our brand, or when we were starting to launch our brand, we were trying to find a co-packer to bottle our milk for us. And that was so hard, we couldn't get that done. So we finally did purchase a creamery where we bottle our own milk, and our son oversees that. So it's wonderful to have a family member overseeing it. He also oversees our dairies in Humboldt. Our daughter is our dairy manager, and our other son manages irrigation, harvesting in the fields. So it's really a blessing to have our kids involved. We have a creamery management call in a little bit, but our son runs that. So we just can be on if we want to listen to it, but he's got it under control.
Yeah, I totally get that, having family involved. And there's some things that make it more challenging when that happens, but what a blessing. And yeah, right next door, my son Jakin has taken over the management responsibilities of the sales team. So I don't have to do that anymore. And my brother's son Travis is running a lot of the operations. So like we've been very blessed to have family working with us. And also, like you, we've had to do our own processing. Now, our processing a seed is not nearly as complicated as running a creamery, but so you're not only doing the production and the marketing, but you're doing that piece in the middle as well, which is all that processing. And each one of those has its unique challenges. Where do you find that? Maybe this is the question. Which of those three do you enjoy the most, and which of those three do you find that if you don't put the effort and attention into it, it kind of starts to slip away from you? Production,
Yeah,
processing, marketing.
that's a great question. I guess I'll go first, and curious to hear Stephanie's answer. But I've always enjoyed, at first it was the cows, and then I realized that I'm not a patient person, and I'm kind of a big picture thinker and visionary, and so the cows got a little boring, and so then it was the land and the soil and all that, and so that's been really exciting, but it's hard to do a lot on the land without a budget to afford to do things differently, and so then as we jumped into this marketing, which did we were forced to have our own creamery because we couldn't find a processor that was willing to take our unique stream of organic A2 milk and run it through their facility and give us unique products on the other end. There was a little bit of hope for that, and we had one, and then they canceled 5 months before we launched. So we ended up purchasing this little yogurt facility and making it work for us. And so, to answer your question, I really I enjoy this. I enjoy this conversation, teaching, leading, um, connecting the dots and bringing things together. And I think the brand is what has opened that up for us. So I'd say as I age out and kids do more at home, I enjoy being on the road and promoting what we do, whether it's the brand or the regenerativeness.
Because we're owners, and me especially, I feel like I can have an opinion everywhere. um, I love nutrition. I love marketing. I love telling our story. I think it's a great story to tell and really believe in it and called to it, to do it for him and for his kingdom. Um, I'm in I oversee all finance and some legal too. And so that's where I spend most of my time, unfortunately. It's not what I want to do, but it's what I have to do. And I love having an opinion with marketing, but oftentimes a finance brain is a different brain than marketing. And so if I can handle marketing things the first thing in the morning, it's when I can do it. But the rest of the day, I'm usually with finance stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see where, again, necessary, but not
Yeah.
necessarily, what brings you the energy. So I'm curious, Stephanie, telling the story, and you do a great job of it. Which of the social media platforms have you found that you feel like is most effective in reaching customers? And maybe it's different ones for different segments, but I'm always curious because we're always struggling with this with Green Cover is which of those platforms are going to give you the most, where do you focus your attention that you feel like you get the best return?
I We're on LinkedIn and uh, Instagram and Facebook. I think definitely between Facebook and Instagram, I would lean towards Instagram. We watch the number of watches, the responses. We get more there, I believe. I feel like the Facebook stays a little bit more localized from the responses, but I'm not sure, and I'm certainly not the one that knows the correct answer. I'm just guessing. We have a marketing team now that does that stuff for us, but we definitely, Blake and I and our daughter Vanessa, oversee it and have strong opinions of our marketing. We certainly want it to be real. We want our employees to send us video of what they're doing, things like
Mhm.
that, so that it's legitimate and this is what's happening on the farm. We're definitely have an opinion there.
Yeah, and I don't do anything on social media, so I don't ever watch our content other than when it's being produced, maybe. And we've been training kind of a new marketing team, kind of the younger generation this past year, and a few months into that argument, I realized, oh, these folks are trying to impress us with their talents to produce things. And I was like, no, just stop doing that. Just come over here with a camera and video our employees doing what they do. Just document it. Don't produce it. We don't need to create data or content or whatever it's called. And so for the last 3 months, we've had this policy where I get to approve everything before it goes out. because I have such a firm opinion. And so it's really more to train our team than to send the messaging out. But I just want it to be authentic, real content. And
Yeah.
I also had a strong opinion 2, 3 years ago that we were not going to do TikTok because of the China connection and all that. And I just didn't want to be part of that world. And so, that was a huge argument with our folks back then, but I don't miss it.
I would like to see us concentrating also on educational components. I notice that when you're teaching somebody something or you do a post that's a kind of a meme with education, people tag other people and that grows your following. So I would like us to go back more to educational stuff in the future. In addition to always, what's going on the farm today kind of segments we've been doing to where people know the heart of our farm.
Yeah, that's great. And I love Blake. I love what you're saying. Basically, you're saying that you just need to tell the story because the story's already happening. You don't need to create new stories.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we always invite everybody, come see our farm, right? We've had some issues in California with the bird flu transferring over to dairy cattle, so we aren't able to, openly have everybody come anymore. But that should pass, and we just encourage folks to come see us, whether it's Whole Foods or customers. We've got the real thing here. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it wasn't that one of the original milk marketing slogans, the something about real
Yeah.
milk or something.
Real
So
milk.
you're the real.
The
Yeah.
real seal.
Yeah. Exactly. We're
Yeah,
the
I love it.
organic version of that.
Yes. Yeah, you might want to roll with that. So maybe as we kind of close here, I I like closing with the question, how would you what advice would you have for someone who's just getting started? And I think maybe I'll make it specifically because you're already doing this, with the conference that you say you have coming up. You're already helping people get started. But what are some of the key things that you're going to tell folks at this, small conference you're putting on, to help people learn how to produce these products, these dairy products in regenerative ways so you can in good conscience market them through your brand. What would be some of the main
Yeah.
things that you'll tell them?
Yeah, it all stems from us being the very first certified regenerative farm in the United States. As we kind of received the honor of being the first certified regenerative farm or regenerative brand, really, it kind of put some weight on our shoulders to understand regenerative and carry that message forward. And then therefore we're trying to teach others along the way. And when I think that we're going to have farmers come and see what we do, I really just want to make it part of the practical experience. And often regenerative is not like organic. It's organic came out in the got defined in the 90s, and then became a premium in the marketplace. And if the premium's not there or there's not room for more product, then it's not really an open door for conventional farmers to convert on into that process. When we look at regenerative, we should not compare it to that. I believe that the efficiencies and the benefits from regenerative practices come in year 1, year 2, year 3, directly to the farmer who's growing the crop. And it comes in the form of, reducing inputs and improving and increasing yields. And so that's the marketplace where this needs to make sense. And so it's simply explaining to dairy farmers, crop farmers, whoever across the country and around the world, that this is the smart way to farm in harmony with nature and harmony with what God's plan was. And we will all prosper because of that. We don't have to sell a regenerative product in the marketplace and think we're going to get an extra 10 cents a unit. That's not the end goal here. The end goal is just to make your organic matter grow on your farm at a higher rate. And so we will teach them a little bit about, why we let the grasses get tall, why we let the cows knock some of it over to feed the microbes and eat maybe 2/3 of it. Those kinds of simple things.
Okay, great. Stephanie, what advice would you give them? If now they're going to market through your brand, but if somebody was wanting to start their own brand, whether it's dairy or eggs or regenerative vegetables, whatever it is, what would be a good piece of advice you'd give someone going down that path?
Follow your passion, first of all, and be down on your knees praying. But we really believe in the regenerative practices, and I think Blake's going to and Vanessa are going to do an outstanding job showing that, and Joseph, our son, too, and Christian. Just that what we're doing at the pasture level, and whether we all talk about who has the best gate handles or electric wires or posts, we're all learning, and let's learn together as an industry and better that. As far as marketing and stuff, that is just telling your story, word of mouth, friends in the industry, all that kind of
Right. I
information.
just thought of something I think
Go ahead.
is important to add that we probably don't say nearly often enough. Need to, as farmers, as unique farmers selling products, just even to our neighbors at a farmer's market, we need to charge the appropriate pricing. Don't undersell your product. Don't don't price your half gallon of milk 50 cents or $1 above the competitor. Price it at $3 above because it is 100% grass fed, because it's worth it. Otherwise, it's not a sustainable project for you or them. And so don't undersell your product. We really gotta there also understand that you're only trying to sell to 5% of the consumers. You don't need a mainstream brand. We're not trying to be successful at Walmart. We really don't care about Walmart and Costco's food. They're doing a good job bringing in organics, but that's not for our premium price stuff. Our premium price stuff is going to support Whole Foods, Sprouts, Natural Grocers, and all the other high-end natural food stores. And
Yeah.
and so
And for us, one of our dreams was that we could have rural revival around us. We had 3 dairy farmers in the last few years go out of business in our neighborhood. And it's sad that shouldn't have happened. They're producing a wonderful food that's in great demand today. And if they would have lasted, but they didn't. And what can we do to protect the other farmers, our neighbors, our community? That is that's an answer for everybody. We got to raise prices to the farmers, and they're going to get it by doing something different, and that call out of regenerative organic.
Yeah, I love that because part of regenerative farming is regenerating your community, regenerating the relationships with neighbors, and I love that, and I love the educational aspect that you talked about. And so, as we close, I hope to see you folks again at a Regenerative Nexus where we do these things. We help build communities. We help educate each other. And folks, if you're listening and you're curious about what those events are, just shoot us an email, give us a call. We'd love to talk to you more about what that looks like. But Blake and Stephanie, I knew that I would enjoy this conversation, and I really did. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for the way that you're doing it. Thank you for providing such great products. And thank you for being willing to share your story. And thank you, folks, for joining the Green Cover Podcast. We hope that you have a great regenerative day.
thank you,
you.
Keith, and everybody at Green Cover. We
Yes.
appreciate you guys.
My brother and I started Green Cover in 2009 because we understand what it's like to be a farmer starting out on the journey to improve soil health. We saw the power of plant and biological diversity on our own farm here in Nebraska, but we found that it was difficult to get the right cover crop seed mix. We also learned that there was a big learning curve in successfully implementing cover crops. That's why we built Green Cover, so that farmers like you can access the highest quality cover crop seed put into the right diverse mixes, along with the technical advice and the educational resources to help you successfully implement cover crops on your own operation. So contact us today and we'll help you with the right cover crop mix for your farm or ranch so you can regenerate your portion of God's creation for future generations.